Back to the unfolding situation now in the Middle East, where there have been reports, as we have been reporting this afternoon, Israel has carried out a strike in Iran. It now seems that it was 2 drones, and it's been reported in the last few moments that the US was warned this was coming. Now, it follows Iran's attack, of course, on Israel last weekend, where we witnessed it firing hundreds of missiles and drones toward Israel, many that did get through and did damage. Let's break this down with Ran Porat, who is an affiliate research associate at the Australian Centre for Jewish Civilisation at Monash University. He joins us on the line. Ran, how on edge should the world be over what's happened today?
Not at all. So the Israeli response to the massive and colossal failure last week by the Iranians, where they shot or fired more than 300 different flying weapons at Israel and managed to maybe put into Israel maybe 1 or 2. So the Israeli response was very mild, very designed to allow what we call the plausible deniability zone for the Iranians. It sends a strong message without dragging the Iranians to the sort of spiral of self-inflicted insults and self-inflicted extremism that ended up committing themselves to an attack. So it was 3 or 4 unknown number of drones, quadcopters as we call them, flying over a military base in Isfahan, where, by the way, there are some nuclear facilities, quite sensitive ones, sending a clear message that if Israel wants to, they can definitely hit a more strategic target. But in this case, it's just an early warning that to draw a line in the sand, this will not go unanswered. And just between you and me, I think it's not the end of the Israeli response. There will be other responses which we'll not learn about, will not be public, but the Ayatollahs will understand very clearly that they come from Israel.
Ran, do you think the Iranians would have been surprised that the Israeli military were able to get so far into Iran undetected and carry this out?
No, because Israel has done it more than once in the past, in some cases in a sci-fi manner. The elimination of top nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh a few years ago with some sort of satellite-controlled weapon on the ground. The attacks on, for instance, a nuclear facility in a place called Karaj, where parts of centrifuges were made in 2021, were all conducted from Iranian soil. And that's exactly what happened here. Imagine, for example, let's say North Korea, Kim Jong-un wakes up in the morning, looks out and sees 4 US drones at his face. This is what happened here. The Iranians are trying to sort of portray the event as minimal or failed or whatever to allow them to actually contain their response, which is what was expected of Israel. But at the same time, it's a very strong message and very clear one.
I mentioned that it's now being reported by several news outlets in the US that the Americans were forewarned, but if these reports are right, continue to urge Israel not to do this. What's your reaction to that?
Of course, the Americans were warned, because they were not warned the previous attack, the elimination of senior IRGC Iranian commander Zaidi in Damascus on April 1st. They were not warned because Israel assumed that the Iranian attack or response would be sort of mild or contained. But this time they learned their lessons, the Israelis, and they warned the Americans, which is what the Americans expected. It was a smart decision because now Israel would like to leverage the success in blocking the attack from last week into something which is a strategic accomplishment. For instance, forging the expected normalization deal with Saudi Arabia and reaching finally an agreement on the modus operandi, the format of the necessary attack on the last Hamas pockets, a few thousand warriors, fighters, terrorists in Rafah. So that is the trade-off. the limited attack, at least publicly limited, in exchange for strategic accomplishment, and that is smart, not acting out of a knee-jerk reaction or out of a sense of revenge. It's a long-term thinking.
We just saw an interview on Erin Molan's program with a reporter on the ground in Tel Aviv, and she made the point to Erin that life was going on as normal in that city, and there's people in the water surfing and people walking their dogs. I mean, to Australians from this distance who've not been to Israel, me included, that seems unusual that you could just carry on as if nothing was happening when you have Israel responding to what Iran had done last weekend. How do you explain that to us?
It's hard to, when I teach my students about that kind of reality that is actually prevalent across the Middle East, but is obvious in Israel, that you grow up from a very early age understanding that your life is always a sort of on the balance, or there's always some sort of conflict and war and fighting going on somewhere. And Israel is very, unfortunately, since October 7th, have been living in a very, very harsh reality of a very strong and unprecedented war. And they sort of, it grows on you. They sort of understand or have learned how to cope with it psychologically and on a practical level. Of course, the long-term psychological damage or implications and economical implications and many other implications, of course, are quite harsh and quite horrible. But you live only once, and in Israel you live sometimes a very tough life. Makes you tough.
I love your optimism, Ran Porat. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.